The emergency room at Balboa Naval Medical Center buzzed with its usual controlled chaos on that humid San Diego evening in August 2018. Nurse Sarah Mitchell had been working the night shift for 3 years, but nothing could have prepared her for what was about to walk through those doors. Lieutenant Commander Jake Harrison arrived unconscious, his SEAL team members carrying him in with faces etched in worry. Blood seeped through his tactical gear, and his breathing was shallow and labored. Sarah immediately sprang into action, her training taking over as she assessed the situation with clinical precision. "What happened?" she asked the team leader while quickly checking Jake's vitals. "Training accident," came the terse reply. "Explosive detonated too close. He took shrapnel to the chest and abdomen." Sarah's hands moved with practiced efficiency, cutting away Jake's gear to reveal the extent of his injuries. Multiple deep lacerations crossed his torso, and she could see that one piece of metal had penetrated dangerously close to his heart. Time was running out. The attending physician was tied up with another critical case, and the surgical team was still being assembled. Sarah knew that every second counted. She had seen enough trauma cases to recognize when someone was slipping away, and Jake Harrison was fighting for his life. Without hesitation, she began emergency stabilization procedures that went beyond her typical nursing duties. Her fingers worked to control the bleeding while she monitored his airway. When his blood pressure began to crash, she administered medication that helped bring him back from the brink. "Stay with me," she whispered, though Jake couldn't hear her. Something about this wounded warrior struck her differently than other patients. Maybe it was his young face, barely visible beneath the dirt and blood, or perhaps it was the way his team members waited anxiously in the hallway, their tough exterior cracking with concern for their leader. Sarah had always been drawn to helping people, but her dedication to military families ran deeper than professional obligation. Her own brother had served 2 tours in Afghanistan as an army medic, and she understood the unique sacrifices these men and women made. Every service member who came through her emergency room reminded her of him. As she worked to keep Jake stable, she noticed the small details that spoke to his character. Despite being unconscious and critically injured, his dog tags lay perfectly aligned on his chest. His wedding ring finger bore a pale band of skin, suggesting he had recently removed a ring, probably to avoid injury during training. His hands, though rough from military service, were surprisingly gentle-looking. The surgical team finally arrived, and Sarah briefed them quickly on Jake's condition and the treatments she had administered. The head surgeon nodded approvingly at her quick thinking and thorough care. "Good work, Mitchell. You probably saved his life with those interventions." As they wheeled Jake into surgery, Sarah found herself thinking about him throughout the rest of her shift. She had treated hundreds of patients, but something about this SEAL commander lingered in her mind. Maybe it was the vulnerability she had glimpsed beneath his warrior exterior, or perhaps it was simply the professional satisfaction of knowing her quick actions had made a difference. The next morning, Sarah learned that Jake had survived the surgery and was expected to make a full recovery. She felt a wave of relief wash over her, followed by a strange emptiness. Her job was done, and like so many other patients, Jake Harrison would move on to recovery and eventually return to his unit. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their paths would cross again. She had no way of knowing that the unconscious SEAL commander whose life she had helped save would one day become the most important person in her world. For now, she was content knowing that her skills and dedication had given him a second chance at life. In the days that followed, Sarah threw herself back into her routine, but colleagues noticed a change in her demeanor. She seemed more contemplative, more invested in each patient's story. The other nurses teased her about being distracted, but Sarah couldn't explain the feeling that something significant had shifted in her life that night. Jake's team members returned a few days later with updates on his condition and heartfelt thanks for the care he had received. They spoke of their commander with deep respect and affection, painting a picture of a leader who genuinely cared for his men and consistently put their welfare before his own. "He would have wanted us to thank you personally," one of the SEALs told Sarah. "Jake always says that the medical staff are the real heroes because you guys save lives without asking for recognition." Sarah smiled at the sentiment, but part of her wished she could have met Jake under different circumstances. She found herself wondering what he was like when he wasn't fighting for his life on an operating table. Was he as thoughtful as his team suggested? Did he have family waiting for him? What dreams did he harbor beyond his military service? These questions would remain unanswered for now, but fate has a way of bringing people together when they're meant to find each other. Sarah had no idea that her professional dedication and compassionate care had planted the seeds for a love story that would unfold in the most unexpected ways. As summer turned to fall, Sarah continued her work at the hospital, carrying with her the memory of the SEAL commander, who had reminded her why she became a nurse in the first place. She had chosen this profession to make a difference in people's lives, and that night in August had proven that sometimes a single moment of caring could change everything. The story of Sarah and Jake had begun with her hands working to save his life, but their real journey together was still waiting to unfold. Sometimes the most powerful connections are forged in moments of crisis, when one person's professional skill and human compassion meet another's deepest need. Neither of them knew it yet, but that night had set in motion a chain of events that would eventually lead them both home to each other. Jake Harrison opened his eyes to the sterile white ceiling of the Naval Hospital recovery ward, his body aching in ways he had never experienced before. The soft beeping of monitors filled the quiet room, and the antiseptic smell reminded him immediately where he was. As consciousness fully returned, fragments of memory began piecing themselves together like a puzzle with missing pieces. The training exercise had gone wrong in seconds. One moment he was leading his team through a demolition scenario, and the next he was flying through the air as debris rained down around him. The last thing he remembered was the concerned faces of his teammates before everything went black. "Welcome back, Commander," a familiar voice said from beside his bed. Jake turned his head slowly to see Dr. Martinez, the naval surgeon who had operated on him. "How long?" Jake's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. 3 days. You gave us quite a scare there. We had to remove several pieces of shrapnel and you lost a lot of blood. But you're going to be fine." As Dr. Martinez explained the extent of his injuries and the long recovery ahead, Jake found himself thinking about the moments before he lost consciousness. He had a vague memory of gentle hands and a calm, reassuring voice telling him to stay strong. The memory was hazy, like trying to remember a dream, but the feeling of safety and care lingered. "Doctor, who was the nurse who helped me in the emergency room? I have this memory of someone being there before surgery." Dr. Martinez smiled. "That would be Sarah Mitchell. She's one of our best trauma nurses. Her quick thinking and immediate intervention probably saved your life. She kept you stabilized until we could get you into surgery." Jake made a mental note of the name. In his military career, he had learned the importance of acknowledging those who had your back, and this nurse had literally kept him alive when he couldn't fight for himself. The recovery process was challenging for someone accustomed to peak physical condition and constant activity. Jake had always been the type of person who pushed through pain and adversity, but healing required a different kind of strength. He had to learn patience with his body's limitations and accept help from others, which didn't come naturally to a man trained to be self-reliant. During his stay at the hospital, Jake became a favorite among the medical staff. Despite his injuries, he maintained his natural leadership qualities and genuine concern for others. He remembered the names of every nurse, doctor, and orderly who cared for him, and he always asked about their families and lives outside the hospital. "You know, Commander, most patients are so focused on themselves that they barely notice us as people," commented Maria, one of the day shift nurses. "But you treat everyone like they matter." Jake smiled from his hospital bed. "Everyone does matter. You all chose to spend your lives taking care of others. That deserves respect and recognition." This attitude was exactly what had made Jake such an effective leader among his SEAL team. He understood that real strength came not from individual toughness alone, but from building connections and taking care of the people around you. As the days passed, Jake found himself asking different staff members about Sarah Mitchell. He learned that she worked the night shift and had a reputation for going above and beyond for her patients. Several people mentioned her dedication to military families and her brother's service in the Army. Jake felt a growing desire to meet this woman who had played such a crucial role in saving his life, but their schedules never aligned. By the time he was awake and alert in the evenings, she had already finished her shift. When she was working at night, he was usually asleep from pain medication. One evening, Jake convinced his day nurse to help him write a thank you letter to Sarah. He wanted to express his gratitude properly, even if he couldn't do it in person. Writing had never been his strongest skill, but he poured his heart into the letter, trying to convey how much her care had meant to him and his family. "Dear Nurse Mitchell," he began, "I understand that you were instrumental in saving my life during my emergency room visit. While I cannot remember much from that night, I have been told that your quick actions and professional expertise made the difference between life and death for me. As someone who has spent his career trying to protect others, I have deep appreciation for people like you who dedicate their lives to healing and helping. Thank you for giving me the chance to continue serving my country and for allowing me to return to the people I love. Your compassion and skill represent the very best of what it means to serve others." He went on to share a bit about himself, his team, and his gratitude for the entire medical staff. Jake hoped that somehow this letter would convey the impact she had made, not just on his physical recovery, but on his perspective about the interconnected nature of service and sacrifice. The letter was delivered to Sarah during one of her shifts, but Jake had already been transferred to an outpatient rehabilitation facility by then. He would spend the next several weeks there, rebuilding his strength and preparing to return to duty. During rehabilitation, Jake threw himself into recovery with the same intensity he brought to everything else. Physical therapy sessions were grueling, but he pushed through them with determination. His goal was not just to return to active duty, but to come back stronger than before. His SEAL teammates visited regularly, bringing updates from their unit and reminding him that his leadership was missed. They also brought news from the hospital, including the fact that his thank you letter had made quite an impression on the nursing staff. "That nurse you wrote to, Sarah Mitchell, apparently kept your letter," one of his teammates mentioned. "The other nurses say she was really touched by it. Seems like she doesn't get much recognition for the work she does." This information pleased Jake more than he expected. He had hoped his words would mean something to her, just as her actions had meant everything to him during his darkest moment. As his recovery progressed, Jake found himself thinking about the concept of second chances. His injury could have ended his military career or even his life, but instead, it had given him a new perspective on what truly mattered. The experience had reinforced his belief in the importance of human connection and the power of people caring for each other. He was determined to make the most of the second chance that Sarah Mitchell and the medical team had given him. But deep down, Jake also hoped that someday he would have the opportunity to properly thank the woman whose hands had guided him back from the brink of death. He had no way of knowing that fate was already weaving their stories together in ways neither of them could imagine. Sarah folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into her locker for the third time that week. Jake Harrison's handwritten words had touched something deep within her that she hadn't expected. In her years as a trauma nurse, she had received thank you cards and flowers from grateful patients and families. But this letter felt different. There was a sincerity and depth to his words that spoke to her heart. The letter had arrived during a particularly difficult stretch at work. Budget cuts had reduced staffing, and Sarah found herself pulling extra shifts to cover for colleagues. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, and had begun questioning whether she was making a real difference in her chosen profession. Jake's letter had reminded her why she became a nurse in the first place. His words about service and sacrifice resonated with her own values, and his gratitude for her quick actions that night reinforced her belief that every patient deserved her very best effort. What struck her most was how he had taken the time to learn about her background and acknowledge her brother's military service. Most patients never bothered to see their medical caregivers as whole people with their own stories and motivations. But Jake had recognized her as an individual and honored her family's commitment to serving others. Sarah had always been drawn to military personnel who came through the emergency room. Their discipline, resilience, and dedication to something greater than themselves reminded her of her brother Michael, who had been killed by an improvised explosive device during his second deployment in Afghanistan. Michael's death had devastated their family, But it had also strengthened Sarah's resolve to serve military families in her own way. Every service member she treated carried a piece of her brother's memory, and she approached their care with the same intensity she would have wanted someone to show Michael if he had needed help. The night she saved Jake's life, she had seen something in him that reminded her of Michael's quiet strength and natural leadership. Even unconscious and critically injured, Jake had possessed a dignity and presence that spoke to his character. Now, reading his letter over and over, Sarah found herself wanting to know more about the man behind the words. His teammates had painted a picture of someone who genuinely cared about the people under his command, and his letter revealed a thoughtful, articulate person who understood the deeper meaning of service. Weeks passed, and Sarah threw herself back into her work routine, but colleagues noticed she seemed more energized and focused than she had in months. The letter from Jake Harrison had rekindled her passion for nursing and reminded her of the profound impact she could have on people's lives. One evening in late October, Sarah was finishing up her shift when she received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end was warm and slightly nervous. "Is this Sarah Mitchell? This is Jake Harrison. I wanted to call and thank you personally for what you did for me back in August." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had imagined this conversation many times since receiving his letter, but she hadn't expected him to actually call. "Commander Harrison, how are you feeling? I heard you made a full recovery. Please call me Jake, and yes, I'm doing well thanks to you. I'm actually back to limited duty now, though I'm still working on getting back to full operational status." They talked for nearly an hour, their conversation flowing naturally from his recovery to her work at the hospital, to their shared connections to military life. Sarah found herself drawn to Jake's genuine interest in her thoughts and experiences. He asked thoughtful questions about her nursing career and listened intently to her answers. Jake, for his part, was captivated by Sarah's intelligence, compassion, and quiet strength. Her voice carried the same calming quality he remembered from his emergency room experience, and her insights about military families revealed a depth of understanding that impressed him. "I keep thinking about that night," Jake admitted toward the end of their conversation. "Not just because of what happened to me, but because of how you took care of me. My team told me you went above and beyond what was required." "I just did my job," Sarah replied, though she was touched by his words. "No, it was more than that. I've been in enough emergency situations to know the difference between someone doing their job and someone who genuinely cares. You cared, and that made all the difference." Their phone conversation ended with plans to talk again soon, and both Jake and Sarah found themselves looking forward to their next interaction with an anticipation that surprised them. Over the following weeks, their phone calls became a regular occurrence. Jake would call during his evening downtime, and Sarah would talk to him during her breaks at work or after her shifts ended. Their conversations ranged from light topics like favorite books and movies to deeper discussions about their families, their career motivations, and their experiences with military life. Sarah learned that Jake came from a small town in Montana, where his father had been a high school principal and his mother taught elementary school. His decision to join the Navy and eventually become a SEAL had been driven by a desire to serve his country and push himself to his physical and mental limits. Jake discovered that Sarah had grown up in a military family, moving frequently during her childhood as her father served in various army postings. Her decision to specialize in trauma nursing had been influenced by her desire to help people during their most vulnerable moments, much like the military medical personnel who had cared for her brother Michael. Their connection deepened with each conversation, built on shared values and mutual respect. Both had dedicated their lives to serving others, though in different ways, and both understood the sacrifices that commitment required. One evening in November, Jake asked Sarah if she would be interested in meeting for coffee on one of her days off. The question hung in the air for a moment as both realized they were crossing from friendship into something more personal. "I'd like that," Sarah replied, her voice soft but certain. As they made plans for their first face-to-face meeting since that night in the emergency room, both felt the nervous excitement of new possibilities. Neither could have predicted that a traumatic evening in August would lead to this moment. But sometimes the most meaningful connections are born from the most unexpected circumstances. Jake had been given a second chance at life that night, And now it seemed like fate was offering both of them a second chance at something even more precious than survival. The foundation of their relationship had been built on a moment when Sarah's professional skill and personal compassion had literally kept Jake alive, creating a bond that was both profound and unbreakable. Their first coffee date would mark the beginning of a new chapter in their story, one built on the solid ground of mutual respect, shared values, and the recognition that they had found in each other something worth fighting for. Sarah arrived at the small coffee shop in Balboa Park 15 minutes early, her nerves getting the better of her punctuality. She had changed clothes 3 times that morning, finally settling on a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes. This wasn't technically a date, she reminded herself. Just 2 people meeting to continue the conversations they had been having over the phone for weeks. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Their phone calls had revealed layers of compatibility that went far beyond their initial connection as nurse and patient. She found herself thinking about Jake throughout her workdays, looking forward to his calls, and wondering what it would be like to see him again, under normal circumstances. Jake arrived exactly on time, still moving with the measured gait of someone recovering from serious injuries but looking much healthier than the last time Sarah had seen him. He wore civilian clothes, jeans, and a navy blue sweater that complemented his build, and his face broke into a genuine smile when he spotted her at a corner table. "Sarah," he said, approaching the table with a slight limp that he tried to minimize. "You look wonderful." She stood to greet him, and for a moment they both hesitated, unsure of the appropriate greeting. Finally, Jake extended his hand, and Sarah took it, feeling the warmth and strength that had survived his ordeal. "It's good to see you upright and conscious," Sarah said with a gentle laugh that eased the initial awkwardness. Their conversation flowed as naturally in person as it had over the phone, covering everything from Jake's rehabilitation progress to Sarah's recent experiences at the hospital. But there were also moments of comfortable silence, where they simply enjoyed each other's presence and the novelty of being able to read facial expressions and body language. Jake found himself studying Sarah's face, trying to reconcile his hazy, emergency room memories with the composed, intelligent woman sitting across from him. Her eyes held a depth of compassion that he found deeply attractive, and her quick wit and genuine laughter made him forget about his lingering physical limitations. Sarah was struck by Jake's quiet confidence in the way he made her feel like the most interesting person in the room. He asked thoughtful questions about her work and listened to her answers with the kind of focused attention that made her feel truly heard and valued. "I have to admit something," Jake said, as they walked through the park after coffee. "I've thought about that night in the emergency room many times, but not just because of my injuries. I had this sense, even in my confused state, that someone special was taking care of me." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I was just doing my job, Jake." "Maybe, but you did it with a kind of caring that went beyond professional obligation. I could feel it even when I couldn't respond." Their first meeting extended into an impromptu lunch, then a walk along the harbor, and finally an early dinner. By the time they parted ways that evening, both knew that something significant was developing between them. Over the following months, their relationship deepened gradually but steadily. Jake's demanding military schedule and Sarah's rotating shift work made regular dating challenging, but they found ways to make time for each other. Sometimes Jake would visit Sarah at the hospital during his lunch breaks, bringing coffee for her and her colleagues. Other times, Sarah would meet Jake at the base gym, where she would watch him work through his physical therapy exercises with the same determination he brought to everything else. Their second official date was a small disaster that became a cherished memory. Jake had planned an elaborate picnic on the beach, complete with homemade sandwiches and a playlist of songs he thought Sarah would enjoy. But an unexpected storm rolled in, soaking them both and ruining the food. Instead of letting the weather defeat them, they ended up in a 24-hour diner, laughing about their soggy clothes and sharing French fries while rain poured against the windows. "This is definitely not how I pictured this going," Jake admitted, attempting to dry his hair with paper napkins. "It's perfect," Sarah replied, and she meant it. The elaborate plans hadn't mattered as much as being together and seeing how Jake handled unexpected challenges with humor and adaptability. As spring turned to summer, their relationship faced its first real test. Jake received orders for a training, Deployment that would take him away for 6 weeks. The timing felt cruel, just as they were building something meaningful together. The night before he left, they sat on Sarah's apartment balcony, both trying to navigate the complex emotions of a new relationship facing separation. "I don't want to ask you to wait," Jake said quietly. 6 weeks is a long time when we're just getting to know each other. Sarah took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "You're not asking me to wait. I'm choosing to wait. This us, it's worth waiting for." Their separation proved to be a strengthening force rather than a dividing one. They wrote emails almost daily, sharing their thoughts, experiences, and growing feelings for each other. Jake's messages revealed his vulnerability beneath his warrior exterior, while Sarah's letters showed her strength and unwavering support. When Jake returned, tanned and more physically fit than ever, he brought with him a new certainty about their relationship. He had spent 6 weeks thinking about Sarah every day, and he knew that what they had was special and worth fighting for. Their reunion at the airport was emotional and intense. Sarah had arrived early, pacing the terminal and checking flight information every few minutes. When Jake emerged from the jetway, their eyes met across the crowded gate area, and both began moving toward each other, as if drawn by an invisible force. Their embrace was long and tight, both of them unwilling to let go after weeks of separation. Other passengers smiled as they passed the couple, recognizing the joy of a military homecoming. "I missed you so much," Sarah whispered against Jake's ear. "I know exactly what you mean," he replied, holding her even closer. That evening, as they caught up on 6 weeks of separation over dinner, Jake reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice serious but warm. "These past 6 weeks made me realize something important. I'm falling in love with you, Sarah. I know it might seem fast, but when you face life and death situations regularly, you learn not to waste time when you find something real." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes, not from sadness but from relief and joy. "I love you too, Jake. I think I started falling for you during those phone calls, even before we met for coffee." Their relationship had survived its first major challenge and emerged stronger than before. Both knew that military life would continue to present obstacles, but they had proven to themselves and each other that their connection was strong enough to weather separation and uncertainty. As they walked hand in hand along the waterfront that night, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that August evening when an unconscious SEAL commander had arrived in her emergency room. She had saved his life that night, but in many ways, he had saved hers too, giving her a love she had never expected to find and a future that promised adventure, challenge, and deep fulfillment. Jake stood in the jewelry store staring at the display case with more nervous energy than he had felt before any military mission. The engagement rings sparkled under the bright lights, each one beautiful in its own way, but none of them seemed quite right for Sarah. He needed something that reflected her strength, her compassion, and the unique way she had entered his life. It was December 2019, more than a year since their first coffee date, and Jake knew with absolute certainty that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Sarah Mitchell. She had become his anchor, his safe harbor, and his greatest source of joy. But proposing to a woman who had literally saved your life carried a weight that Jake felt deeply. "Can I help you find something?" asked the store clerk, noticing his contemplation. "I need something special," Jake explained. "Jake, it's for someone who saved my life, and now I want to spend the rest of my life with her." The clerk smiled knowingly and led him to a different case. "Tell me about her." Jake found himself describing Sarah in detail, her dedication to her work, her quiet strength, her ability to find humor in difficult situations, and her unwavering support for his military career. As he talked, the clerk pulled out a ring that made Jake's breath catch. The center stone was a brilliant cut diamond, classic and elegant, but it was surrounded by smaller stones arranged in a pattern that resembled a compass rose. The symbolism was perfect for someone who had guided him home to himself. "She's a nurse," Jake explained. "She works with her hands to heal people. The setting needs to be practical but beautiful." "This setting is designed for an active lifestyle," the clerk assured him. "It's secure and won't catch on things, but it's still incredibly elegant." Jake held the ring up to the light, imagining it on Sarah's finger, and knew he had found the perfect symbol of their love story. Planning the proposal proved more challenging than selecting the ring. Jake wanted the moment to be meaningful and personal, reflecting their unique journey together. His first instinct was to propose somewhere connected to their military background, but he realized that their love story wasn't just about his service. It was about both of their dedication to serving others. The idea came to him during one of Sarah's shifts at the hospital. He was visiting during her break, watching her interact with her patients and colleagues, when he realized that this place where they had first met, where Sarah had saved his life, was where their story had truly begun. Jake approached Dr. Martinez, who had performed his surgery, with his unusual request. After hearing the full story, the doctor was more than happy to help arrange something special. On a quiet Saturday evening in January 2020, Jake asked Sarah to meet him at the hospital, claiming he wanted to deliver a thank you gift to the medical staff who had cared for him. Sarah thought it was sweet, if slightly unusual, but she agreed to come in on her day off. When Sarah arrived at the emergency room, she found the area decorated with simple white flowers and soft lighting. Jake stood in the center of the room wearing his dress uniform, looking more nervous than she had ever seen him. "Jake, what's all this?" she asked, looking around in confusion and growing amazement. "This is where our story began," Jake said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "This is where you saved my life, where your hands pulled me back from the edge, where your voice guided me home." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she began to understand what was happening. "I've thought a lot about that night," Jake continued, taking a step toward her. "About how you didn't know me, but you fought for me anyway. You gave everything you had to keep me alive, not because you had to, but because that's who you are." He dropped to one knee, pulling the ring box from his pocket, and Sarah gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. "Sarah Mitchell, you saved my life that night, but you've been saving my life every day since then. You've made me a better man, a better leader, and a better person. You've shown me what it means to love someone completely and to be loved in return." Jake opened the ring box, revealing the compass rose ring that caught the soft light beautifully. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the woman who brought me back to life?" Through her tears, Sarah managed to whisper, "Yes, Jake. Yes, of course, yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the small group of medical staff who had helped arrange the surprise emerged from their hiding places, applauding and celebrating the couple whose love story had begun in their emergency room. Dr. Martinez stepped forward with a smile. "This is definitely the most romantic thing that's ever happened in our ER. Congratulations to both of you." The next few months were a whirlwind of wedding planning, complicated by Jake's military schedule and Sarah's shift work. They decided on a summer wedding, wanting to give themselves time to plan something that honored both of their families and their commitment to service. Sarah's parents, who had moved to San Diego after her father's retirement from the Army, fell in love with Jake immediately. Her father appreciated Jake's dedication to his men and his mature approach to military service, while her mother was charmed by his thoughtful treatment of Sarah and his genuine interest in their family history. Jake's parents made the trip from Montana, and Sarah won them over with her warmth, intelligence, and obvious love for their son. His mother later confided that she had never seen Jake so happy or so settled. The wedding preparations brought both families together in meaningful ways. Sarah's father, a retired Army colonel, found common ground with Jake's Navy SEAL background, sharing stories of military life and discussing the unique challenges military families face. But the wedding planning also highlighted the realities they would face as a military couple. Jake's deployment schedule meant they couldn't plan too far in advance, and they had to build flexibility into every arrangement. Sarah's work schedule at the hospital added another layer of complexity. Despite these challenges, both Jake and Sarah approached their wedding planning with the same teamwork and communication skills that had strengthened their relationship from the beginning. They made decisions together, supporting each other through stressful moments and keeping their focus on what really mattered: their commitment to each other and their shared future. One evening in May, as they addressed wedding invitations at Sarah's kitchen table, Jake reached across and took her hand. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, gesturing to the invitations but meaning so much more. Sarah looked at her engagement ring, still amazed by its beauty and the love it represented, then met Jake's eyes. "I've been ready since the night I met you," she replied. "I just didn't know it yet." Their love story had begun with Sarah's hands working to save Jake's life, and now those same hands wore the ring that promised a lifetime of love, support, and partnership. They had found in each other not just romantic love, but a shared understanding of service, sacrifice, and the importance of caring for others. As they planned their wedding, both Jake and Sarah knew they were not just planning a single day, but laying the foundation for a marriage that would honor the unique way they had found each other and the values that had brought them together. Their wedding would be a celebration not just of their love, but of the miraculous way that one person's professional dedication and another's fighting spirit had created something beautiful and lasting.